Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Wednesday, the 30th of May, comes to you from London. And we start by looking at the dollar index, which rose strongly yesterday on a falling euro, but just retracing back this morning. So we're coming off this morning off about 0.25%, but still bullish on this medium and short-term chart. Upside potential still of about 1.7, 2.6%. So the dollar still holding its strength, even though it's falling back a bit this morning. Euro still bearish below the cloud. A big fall here, really, over the last couple of months from 125 to 115. Yesterday, we saw this big move down. Italexit is the new concern for the the euro and Europe, and markets are rattled by the prospect that Italy might leave the European Union as well. So we're just starting to see that turmoil coming in. And as anyone who's seen my big long-term reports, I've talked about this risk of the euro just collapsing, and we do still have these big long-term targets hanging over us. So we do just need to be aware that that picture would take a long time to unfold, likely, but the fact is that we do have that there. The dollar has been weaker against the yen. Yen typically currency of choice in turmoil has fallen off a little bit over the last trading sessions with the dollar has with the stronger yen. So we're just seeing that yen strength creeping in. And sterling also has fallen away quite heavily against the dollar. Big falls yesterday, recovering a little bit this morning. Still got downside potential here of about 1.3%. And the long-term trend, which was broken earlier this year, now starting to come under pressure again. So we're just seeing that there as well. Against the euro, sterling falling quite heavily this morning has been strong. Euro recovering quite strongly this morning after big falls. And we see here against the Swiss franc, sterling still weak, and the medium-term chart just starting to turn bearish against the Swissy, and the Aussie dollar also just sitting at around this 176 level. So sterling starting to turn bearish there as well. So against a series of currencies, we are seeing sterling just pushing away. Bitcoin recovered somewhat yesterday, taking us back into bullish territory on the short-term chart. We do have an upside target of 2.5% to 7,680, but the reality is that's not yet activated, and the medium-term trend is still pretty worrying. More interestingly, the long-term trend, which a lot of Bitcoin traders won't be looking at, the long-term trend is starting to crack through the cloud here. Unless we get a sharp increase in Bitcoin, we will start to be long-term bearish. So that is just weighing on Bitcoin's ability to recover. We do have these downside targets of some 24, 29% as well to 5,500, 5,000. So it'd be interesting to see. The US market was pretty rattled yesterday with the turmoil in Europe. It's spreading to markets globally, really. Down 2/3% on the S&P. The Nasdaq was also down just under 0.5%, and the Dow was very heavily down as well. So we're just seeing that kicking in too. The Russell 2000 index was also lower, and if we look at the futures this morning, we are seeing a bit of a recovery in the S&P future, up 0.4%, but still bearish, and the Nasdaq E-mini up 1/3%. The UK market had big falls yesterday. We see here just over the last few days we've turned bearish, having just made new highs. We've struggled to hold those new highs, so still looking pretty worrying for the UK market, and UK mid caps also kicking lower as well. The German DAX also looking pretty bearish, kicking lower and failing to make a new high. Downside target of 23% and 22% activated, and short-term downside targets of 1.1 and 1.7%. So it does suggest that markets still could fall further. The CAC Quant, which was looking very good, is also falling heavily, and that contagion with the Italexit not really helping. The Japanese market was off about 1.5% overnight. The Hang Seng also off about 1.5%, similar amount, and Chinese stocks really diving 2.5%. And those of you who will remember my big top 10 report, this is playing out. We've just been quite worried about Chinese markets, and here we're seeing this fall away. Downside potential here, big downside targets, so China is still a worry. Looking at the Indian market, it fared a little bit better. Not much change yesterday, but still not managing to make new highs. And the Aussie market was down about 0.5%. Crude oil holding on at about 75% for Brent crude. Sorry, $75. We were as high as $80, of course. We are just short-term bearish at the moment, just pulling back a bit. And WTI also just pulling back into the mid-60s as well. US nat gas sitting in that $2.90 level. We were as high as $2.95, of course. Interestingly, it's just starting to wander out of the cloud here on the medium-term chart. Need to get above 310 ready for that lagging line to break there. Interestingly, gold has struggled to, with all this turmoil, to make new highs, and we are just hitting some short-term resistance here. Really, just waiting for this summer rally that we saw this time last year, kicked in around the beginning of July. So we might just have a few more weeks before gold can really move. But the long-term targets still are there, and silver also looking stronger as well. If we look at US 10-year yields, sitting at 2.86%, recovered a little bit off that 2.75% we saw yesterday. So really quite a big gyration in bond yields there. Bond markets seeing a lot of volatility. The same with the German bond. The Bund rose quite strongly over the last few days. We're seeing here that really big strong trend in the Bund. But of course, bearish long term, medium term, we kick back above the cloud. Of course, German bond yields sitting at 0.2% roughly, and Italian bond yields now sitting at 2%. So it will be interesting to see the ability in the market for the Italians to borrow money, which they need to do to replace bonds that are reaching maturity. So it will be interesting. Apple was down about 1/3%. We saw also that Amazon was down by a similar amount. These tech stocks really struggling to make new highs. Google also down by a similar amount and still lagging the market quite significantly. Facebook down a little bit less at 0.15%, and Microsoft just holding down at 0.1% as well, but holding its bull trends. Tech in the US just not managing to stage the recovery that we'd hope for. And of course, we are now through May. It will be interesting to see where we go from here. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you.